How's it hanging, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I wanted to talk to you about a graphic novel that I recently read. Godzilla Awakening. This is an original graphic novel, all came out in one chunk. It's not like a mini-series that was collected as a book, and it's basically a prequel to the most recent Godzilla movie that came out, the one that had Walter White from Breaking Bad and Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch married to each other, which I have not seen that movie, and I feel like that is going to be a big problem if you are interested in reading this book. If you have seen the movie, I feel like you would appreciate this a lot more than if you have not seen the movie. Since I have not seen it, this book really didn't do it for me. And I think the reason is this book is backstory for a story that it's paving the way for. And it's not a prequel, it's not like a story that happens to be set before another story and can be taken on its own. This is backstory. This is not its own story. And so I had trouble getting into this because it felt like it was just setting up a story that I have not seen, and the people who are working on the story have seen it, and a lot of the people reading the story have seen it, but I have not. I was just in a Godzilla mood. I've been in a Godzilla mood for a little while now, and I saw this pretty cheap at a used bookstore, and it's like, okay, I'll buy that for $6, and I ended up coming away a little disappointed. Basically, the story is, as I understand it, in that Godzilla movie with Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch married to each other, there is the wise mentor character who is basically there to say, hey, humanity has screwed up. We woke up these monsters. Now we have to pay the consequences. That character is in this story, and this story has a framing device set in the 1980s where his character, his dad, is telling him a story set in the 1950s. So most of this book is set in the 1950s. It starts actually right after the end of World War II, where these various Japanese guys, they see Godzilla for the first time, and then they join up with an American military group, and basically their whole job is tracking all these monsters. You've got the Mutos, which I guess are the bad guys of that Godzilla movie. You've got the Mutos, and then you've got Godzilla. And basically, this group, for most of their career, for about 10 years, they don't really believe in Godzilla except for one guy, and he is the father of the guy in this most recent Godzilla movie who is the one telling everybody, hey, look, humanity is terrible, Godzilla's coming to make us pay for our sins. And that's basically all that's going on here, is that this group is tracking monsters, and they're trying to figure out if there really is a Godzilla. At one point, we get what is, in my opinion, a pretty interesting, I don't want to say origin story, but some backstory on the monsters. We are told that millions and millions and millions of years ago, the monsters fed on radiation, and then this giant meteor came and somehow wiped out most of the radiation on planet Earth. I'll admit it doesn't really make sense, but it's still kind of a cool idea, and because there was a lot less radioactive stuff on the planet, all the monsters had to go away so that they could find sustenance elsewhere. So Godzilla went to the very bottom of the ocean, where the Earth's vents that lead in, the geothermal vents, that's what they're called, basically they leak out enough energy that Godzilla could feed on. And then the Mutos, they went somewhere else, like to the center of the Earth, inside volcanoes or something. And basically, after World War II, you've got the atomic bomb that was dropped a couple of times, once or twice as a test in America, and then once or twice in Japan. And that kind of brought these monsters back out. And they're like, hey, there's more nuclear stuff here on the surface world. Let's feed on this stuff. I will say that's a really interesting idea. What does not make sense is, how long are these monsters going to be able to sustain this new lifestyle of living above the surface world? Because the nuclear bomb was only dropped a handful of times. It's not like these monsters can indefinitely live on the surface world feeding off of the new radioactive material that's now on the surface world that wasn't, say, 100 years earlier. So it really doesn't make sense with what I'm assuming was more backstory in the movie. And like I said, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm curious if the movie has a different explanation for why the monsters are coming about and why they're waking up and causing all this damage. But in this book, we get what I feel like is an interesting reason for why the monsters are coming back. A lot of times in these Godzilla books, it's just like, okay, the monsters are coming up. They're all waking up and they're all causing damage, but we don't really get a clear reason why. This book gives us a reason why, and I feel like it's a good way to tie it in with the nuclear bomb, because the first Godzilla movie was kind of a metaphor for the atom bomb being dropped on Japan. And so I feel like this is a good way of tying all of that into real history. Unfortunately, the rest of this book just doesn't do it for me, because like I said, it's just backstory for a story that I have not seen. And I wish that this had been more of its own story. Maybe if it had been a little bit longer, maybe if it had focused more on one of the humans and made him more of a central character instead of just a plot device for the story to happen, then I feel like this story could have worked a lot better on its own. But the scientist guy, the only one in this group who actually believes that Godzilla is a real thing, I just don't get anything from his character. He doesn't have much of a personality. He's just kind of there and says, I think that Godzilla is real, and everyone else says, okay, buddy, that's fine, but we're going to ignore you, we're going to go do our own thing over here. And he doesn't have much of a personality, and maybe if he did, this book would have worked a lot more for me. But unfortunately, if you are in a Godzilla mood, or if you really enjoyed the movie and you wanted to know if this book is worthwhile, just from the perspective of somebody who hasn't seen the movie, I'm going to say no, this book is not worth your while. But that's just my opinion. If you guys read this book, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back later on in the week with some other videos. So in the meantime, you guys take care, and I'll see you later. Have a great rest of the day.